G'day everyone. So you've probably seen websites like this in the past where you have a split screen and you hover over a section of that screen and maybe the image moves and you can then click onto a link which will take you to a different part of the website. So you probably won't believe this. I mean, it's not over the top with animations, but everything is just CSS. There's absolutely no JavaScript and it's completely mobile friendly. So if you have a look here, and we just make it larger and larger and smaller, you'll see that it works perfectly on all devices. So how did I do this? Well, in this video, you're going to learn how to do it. So let's get started. Just open up your favorite code editor. In my case, I'm using Visual Studio Code, and we're going to create a new folder on our local machine. As you can see, I have a blank website here. Actually, if I refresh it, there we go. And I want to then create two files, one which is going to be index.html, obviously, and the other one which is going to be style.css. If we go into our HTML file, we can easily scaffold the HTML5 using HTML:5 in Visual Studio Code. Whether you can do that in the editor you're using is a different story, but just makes it much easier. All of this code will be available in the link below this video, so you don't have to worry about typing all this out. I'm just going to name this split screen and make a bit of room for the code. Now, if we go back and have a look at this, you'll notice that it's obviously split into two. So basically, we would typically use, in the past, we would use something called floats. So we would float this box on the left and this float on box on the right, and we could make it work, but it's going to be really straightforward because we're going to be using Flexbox. We're not using any frameworks, no Bootstrap, nothing like that. So this is what we can do. First thing we need to do is just scaffold the page. So we'll create a wrapper, div wrapper. Div class equals wrapper, and inside the wrapper we're going to create a left side, so div left, div class equals left, and div right, div class equals right. Now what we then need to do is go into our style.css, but before that we need to obviously link it up. So we'll do link href style.css rel style sheet, and then go into our style.css and let's target the wrapper. Now, because the wrapper is wrapping around the left and the right, we need to tell the wrapper that we want its child divs to display as flex. So let's just do display flex. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure that the left side and the right side are both 50% in width. So let's target the left and the right. So wrapper.left and the wrapper.right. We'll do width 50%. And then we can do a height. Now we're not going to do 100%, we're going to do 100 VH, which is the vertical height of the screen. So if we refer back, if we make this, let's just say shorter, you'll see that it automatically kind of adapts to the screen as well, up and down. So we're going to do 100 VH. And then what we can do is let's just do wrapper left background red and wrapper right background black, just to test this out. So we're going to go and look at the project now. Refresh. There we go. We have two boxes, left and right. You'll notice that though there is a border around the page, and that's because we haven't normalized, we haven't used any kind of CSS reset, and basically it just helps you reset the browser so that it is consistent throughout different browsers. So what you can do is you can just go onto Google and look for something called normalize.css and just click onto their website, click on download and copy the CSS from there. We'll then go into our project. I'll just go back and get it. And create a new CSS file called normalize.css and paste that in. Get out of it and then just attach it. Make sure it's above style.css, so it's the first thing to load. And then we'll refresh that now and everything should look fine. Now, if we make this smaller, you'll see that it's just automatically going to be 50% of the screen, no matter the screen size. But if we look at our example, when we make it smaller, at a certain breakpoint, it's actually changing the orientation and then putting them on top of each other. So to make this work, we're going to use some media queries, which are rules which basically tell it that it needs to do a certain thing at a certain width or a certain height. There are a lot of different types of media queries you can make. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to restrict this specific thing that we did just now to larger screens. So let's say screens over 1200 pixels. So we'll wrap a media query around it, media screen and min width 1200 pixels. And within there, we're just going to put this one here. And we're also going to put the wrapper as well. I'm going to clean this up, make it all nicely formatted. So basically we have the rule which says these are only going to kick in after 1200 pixels. It's going to make it flex, and then each side is going to be 50%. So let's go back and refresh. There we go. So it's still the same there, but then if we go below 1200 pixels, there's nothing there. So what do we need to do? Well, before this media query, we're going to do exactly the same thing, but we're just going to copy this, wrapper left, wrapper right, do 100 pixels, 100%, and then 50 VH. So the width of the screen 100% and the height will be 50 VH. And then wrapper left and wrapper right here should automatically kick in. So we can actually take that there and we can even just put it right at the top because that's being used for both instances of the screen size. So let's go back here and refresh it. Same for desktop. Then we make it a bit smaller and there we go. It automatically switches for the mobile phone and iPad and all that sort of stuff. Cool. Okay, so now that we've made the display flex work properly, we want to now focus on putting the images inside the backgrounds of each side. So dog on the left and cat on the right. I've added the images folder in there with the respective images so we can now use them. And now what we want to do is we want to put the images inside the left and the right hand columns. So to do that, firstly, let's just take away this red and black because we don't need that. We don't need a colored background, and refresh it. It's just going to go back to white now. So let's go back to our index.html and we want to create two divs, one within the left side. We're just going to call it div class image, and one on the right side. So essentially we're going to be placing an image, a div inside each column, and within that image we're going to make the background of this div the photos of the dog and the cat. So we'll go back here and we're going to target that now, wrapper.image, and so that wrapper, for it to fit the background of the dog and the cat, needs to be a width of 100% and a height of 100%. And then what we want to do is we want to put the dog on the left and the cat on the right. So let's create classes for the dog and the cat. We'll go back to our style sheet and we'll do dog background URL images dog.jpg and cat.jpg. Okay, cool. So now that we have the dog and the cat there, if we go and refresh, it should work, but it isn't. And that's because I haven't saved the HTML file yet. Let's refresh it now. There we go. So we have the dog on the left and the cat on the right. But what's happening here? It's not doing exactly how we want it to. That's because we haven't done the background rules. So let's go back to our style.css, and inside wrapper.image, we want it to be background size, cover. Okay. So that's going to make it fit within its container. And then we want to do background position center. Refresh it. There we go. So it's centered now. Obviously you can do right or left or whatever you want, but in this case, I'm just going to center it. Cool. All right. So now if we refer back to the actual example, you'll notice that there's a bit of a slight, really slight darkness, or like a layer between the image and this content here. And that's purely just so we can see the text a bit easier. So let's create that layer. Now we can do it a couple of ways. We can just create a new div, but what we can do is we can take advantage of pseudo elements. So we're going to target the before pseudo element of the image. Oh no, not of the image, sorry, of the left and the right hand side. And we'll create a layer, and we'll then give it a Z index so that it's between the image and the text that we're going to eventually write. So what we can do is, just to make it a bit easier to target both sides, we can create another class here which is called side and assign it to both sides, and then go into our style sheet again and do side. And then we want, actually, let's be more specific, wrapper.side, and then we want to target the before pseudo element. Now inside there, what we want to do is give it a background of RGBA 000.1. So it's essentially black, 000 is black, and then 0.1 is how light it's going to be, or how transparent it's going to be. And as you can see in Visual Studio Code, it actually shows you, which is pretty cool. So if I save that and then I go back to the project, it's not going to work as expected because we need to do a couple of other things to make that work with a pseudo element. First thing we want to do is we want to give it width 100%. So essentially it's like another div, a height of 100%, and then we'll give it a position of absolute. We'll do top 0, left 0, give it a Z index of 1. Now let's save that, see if that works. Refresh it. No, maybe it's too light, so let's make it 0.5. We'll definitely see if it's there now. Nope, still not there. With pseudo elements, you need to give them a property called content and just make it blank. And then you also need to do display block. Refresh now. There we go. We have a layer which is on top of our left and right side. Now let's change it to 0.125 so it's not as dark. There we go. And then what we want to do is we want to add the text in there. So referring back to our example, we have dogs, see our dogs, and cats, see our cats, and there it's a button there. So let's go back to our index.html, and with inside the, actually not inside the image is going to be left as is because that's a positioned absolute, so it doesn't matter anyway. Let's go in here and do div class caption h1 dogs, and copy the same thing. Actually, no, we need to do the button as well. We'll do ahref. We'll give it a class. Oh, just put a hash there because we're not linking to anything. We'll put see our dogs, and we'll give it a class of, let's just say button. Actually, I'll put the class first. And we'll copy the same thing and paste it underneath the right side. And we'll just change that to cats. All right, So let's go and see what happens. Refresh it, but nothing happens, and it's coming up underneath the images. So that's obviously wrong, and that's because we need to make the caption positioned in a certain way that it's not interfering with the div. So let's go back to our style sheet, and that's actually my mistake. So basically, I just thought about it. We didn't absolutely position the left hand and the right hand side here. So we need to absolutely position the image. So position, absolute, top 0, left 0. Let's have a look and see what happens. Okay, so, and as you can see, it's still not working, and it's because we've made another mistake. Well, I've made another mistake where the left hand and the right hand side needs to be position relative. So if you assign position relative to a div which is a wrapper of another div, it will make sure that if that inner div is absolutely positioned, that it's not going to escape because it's relatively absolute to that div, if that makes sense. So let's refresh it again. There we go. So now we have it contained, but we still have our caption, which is nowhere to be seen. So our caption, we need to target that. We'll just go down here. We'll do wrapper.caption. And we want that to be position relative. Save that, refresh it. There we go. Now it's relative to the div that it's inside of, and it seems to be coming up okay. But we want to actually make that and ensure that it is a higher Z index than the inner dark layer that we created. So if I change the dark layer again to 0.5, you'll see that, yeah, it's still there, but we can't actually hover, we can't highlight cats. We can't highlight it because it's actually behind that layer. So let's do Z index 10. I'll refresh it now. And now we can highlight it because that caption is a higher Z index than the layer. Cool. So now we need to center this. How are we going to do that? Well, we can just use Flexbox once again, and which is relatively straightforward. If we refer back to the wrapper left, wrapper right, what we want to do is we want to do display flex on the left and right column. Okay, let's refresh it. Nothing happens there yet. Then we want to do align items center and justify content center. Let's refresh it now. There we go. So basically we've told the left column and the right column that anything within inside of it needs to be displayed with Flexbox. And then we're also telling it that anything inside it needs to be aligned in the center. So smack bang in the center and centered left to right as well. So vertically centered. Cool. So now that we've got that, let's just refer back to this other example, the original example, just to see how it looks. Okay, so we have the title there and the button. Yep. Okay, so we'll go back into our code, go down to caption, and let's just make the color white. And we'll also then target the H1, wrapper, caption, H1. We'll make that uppercase. So how's she looking? There we go, yep. And let's just do a bit of letter spacing for the H1, maybe 0.25 EM. Okay, and then we want to target the button as well. So let's just target the button. And with the button, it was black. So we just want to do background black, the color of the text within it was white, I believe. Yeah. And then we'll just do padding 1 AM from top to bottom and 2 AM left to right. Let's see how that goes. Yeah. We'll do text decoration none. We'll give it a font weight of 600, so it's a bit bolder. We'll do font size 1 EM. Text transform uppercase. And we also want to do some letter spacing there. 0.05 EM, I would say. And then we want to obviously center everything. So we could do that by targeting the caption by itself. So text align center. There we go. Cool. So dogs, cats. Let's have a look at the other one. Okay, see our dogs, see our cats. Okay. So that's looking a bit better. Now, when we hover over the actual image, we want it to do that zoom effect like this one. How do we do that? Well, it is quite simple. We just need to target the hover event. So when you hover over the left or right hand side, we want it to then do something. So let's just do something like, I'll just put it here, wrapper. Actually, I'll just clean everything up, make it a bit nicer to look at. Okay, and we'll just do it right above this media query. Wrapper. When the wrapper on the left is hovered over, we want to target the image inside of it. Or when the wrapper on the right is hovered, we want to target the image with inside that. And then we want to just transform the scale of the background by 1.2. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so as you can see, now when we hover over, it's actually changing the size of the image. So I could actually do something like scale 2, refresh, and it's going to be huge. But what you're noticing here, or what I'm noticing as well, is that the image is getting larger. It's not staying contained within the left and the right hand column. And that comes back to overflow hidden. We need to make sure that the left hand and the right hand side columns stop anything from coming, basically nothing, if it gets large enough, to come outside of them. So we need to contain everything in there. So overflow hidden. And then let's go back and refresh it. There we go. So as you can see now, it's contained. If it goes larger, it's just going to go missing. You're not going to see it, and everything is nice and neat. So what about the nice little transition we had? It takes a bit longer to go in and out. Well, that's really, really straightforward. We just need to add a transition to the image itself. So if we find the image div, because that's the thing that's actually changing, we'll do transition 0.25 seconds, ease, all. Refresh it now. There we go. How nice is that? Okay, so if we hover over the buttons should change color. So that's very, very straightforward. Let's just go back to our buttons and we'll copy this. So when we hover over the button, the background is going to be, I don't know what the color code is, but I'm going to copy it. There we go, background, and the color of the text was black. There we go. So let's have a look and see if this does the same thing. Yeah. There is a bit of a transition with the buttons, however, as well. So let's go back, and where's that transition I did earlier? There we go. Let's copy that and go to the button and just paste it down there. Refresh it. Okay, so that's Seems to be transitioning, but it's quite fast. So if I just make it, let's just say 1 second. It's nice, but it does seem to kind of transition in as well when you press refresh. So it might be best to just keep it at 0.25 or 0.5 perhaps. Yeah, same thing. I don't really like that fade in. So just keep it there. There we go. Nice. Okay, so the last thing was just to make the fonts like how it is here. I keep on clicking on that new browser window. It's so annoying. Sorry about that. Okay, so this font is Montserrat. So let's just go into Google Fonts, grab Montserrat. I think I've already got it when I created the project at the start, but we'll just get 600 and we'll get 300 light. Copy this here, go into the project, paste it in to the header, and then maybe go into our style sheet and just add a rule for the body to be font family Montserrat sans serif, font weight 300, and font size, let's just make it 14 pixels right now. Cool. All right, so let's see how that looks. So pretty much the same thing, but the background is darker. So let's make the background, or that little pseudo element, 0.15, sorry. There we go. Okay. So that is the tutorial, but I want to show you one more thing that I did recently that you might enjoy. It's to add instead of just a fixed see-through background, we can make a gradient. So if we just go into Google and we look for something called CSS gradient. I hate making the gradients from scratch, so you can use a CSS gradient generator, and basically you can create a cool gradient. I'm just going to make it black, and I'll then make this one black as well, but I'll make it so that it kind of gradually goes into it, and I'll make 0 as the angle, so it goes top to bottom, and then I'll just copy this little CSS code here. Now let's replace this background here with this one. Refresh it. How cool is that? You might not use it. You might make it a bit lighter, I would say. So if we just made it slightly lighter on this side here, and just copy and paste, hit refresh. It's still a bit of a gradient, but it looks pretty cool, doesn't it? Okay, so that's the end of the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm a bit rusty with my videos because I haven't done a video for about 9 months since COVID. But if you have any questions, just comment below. Please subscribe, and there are going to be plenty more videos coming our way. A lot of these little tips and tricks ones, and also WordPress ones, Laravel ones. I've got a lot of stuff to teach, and I'm getting back into it. So thank you again.